Waging war on corruption. Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network. Big Brother, mainstream media, government cover-ups. You want answers? Well, so does he. He's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network. And now, live from Austin, Texas, Alex Jones.
Paul Joseph Watson in the hot seat for Alex Jones. Alex will be back tomorrow. We're going to have Anthony Gucciardi in studio in the next segment. But breaking news up on Infowars.com. We mentioned earlier the troops being sent into Liberia and Sierra Leone. U.S. troops would have direct contact with infected Ebola patients. Now we have a top story up on Infowars.com. Pentagon claims Ebola not a huge risk to troops in West Africa. The 4,000 service members being deployed to combat Ebola in West Africa will be, quote, kept safe from the virus, the Defense Department claimed, despite the fact that health officials have failed to contain Ebola, which is now spreading on multiple continents. During a Pentagon news conference today, U.S. Army General David Rodriguez, the commander of U.S. Africa Command, AFRICOM, said the military is using, quote, strict protocols to protect the troops and will implement careful reintegration once they return to the U.S. So we've had hundreds of health workers over in West Africa become infected, despite the fact that they would be normally expected to take the utmost precautions against the virus, and yet now Obama is sending in thousands of troops who will have direct contact with Ebola patients, and the Pentagon is already on the defensive as to whether those troops will receive adequate protection. So a lot of questions being asked about that. We're going to go to more of your calls now. Kathy in Mass, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm pulling it off speakerphone. You went to me very quickly, and I apologize for the delay. All right, I wanted to just say, if this gentleman in Dallas had had good, big private insurance, I guarantee you he might have had a very different experience. I used to have very big private insurance in Dallas, and I had the name that rocks in Dallas, and I'm not going to give it over the air, but I've walked into Zale Lipshe. Well, one time I called my doctor, and he said, he heard my name, was the doctor on call, and he said, oh, no, we want to keep you out of the Parkland ER. You just walk on in. And he told me how to be seen in the employee exam room, even though I wasn't even an employee anywhere, to see a doctor in the employee at Zale Lipshe, which is where the uppity whites go, if I may say uppity whites. And I am white. Bottom line, I bet he would have had a very different experience, especially in Dallas. That said, your former guest, I wanted to mention Reverend Pinkney, tarpley.net. The World Crisis Radio that I heard on August the 30th was amazing, and he's still in this process that he needs a little bit of help, and I just wanted to mention it since I was able to get through today, and it starts at 3627 on August the 30th, and he's pushing back on some very corrupt forces, and I wanted to just give a shout-out so people might could listen to that, and last week's show, he's on there as well.
Okay,
right.
Thanks for the call. Ray in California, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Hello?
You're on the air. Go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, I want to talk about a couple of things. First and foremost, I want to state that they went after Jesse Ventura first, and they discredited him, as you know. And then what happened next is they removed conspiracy theory with Jesse Ventura from the entire internet. I can't get access anywhere on YouTube of the full-length videos. And if you go to True TV apps, they won't allow you to rent them in the United States anymore. They used to charge $1.99. And then at True TV's webpage, you can't access any of the episodes either. And then something happened to Tyrell Ventura. He's no longer on Buzzsaw, and the last time he was on Buzzsaw was April of 2014. So something may be going on with that. All right.
Exactly. I mean, we saw Ventura ostracized from the Huffington Post a couple of years ago. He wrote an article about 9/11. He was basically kicked off the Huffington Post. They refused to carry his articles. Also, with the Conspiracy Theory show, of course, they retroactively removed it from people's TiVos, even though they'd already recorded the episode to their TiVo hard drives. Those episodes, I think it was the FEMA camp episode, was remotely deleted. So definite censorship of information there with Jesse Ventura. We'll continue to track it. More of your calls coming up after the break. We've got Anthony Gucciardi in studio to talk about more issues surrounding Ebola. It's the Alex Jones Show Live. I'm Paul Joseph Watson. Infowars.com. Stay right there. Broke. And its health professionals in Madrid have blamed substandard equipment and a failure to follow protocol for the first case of Ebola to be contracted outside West Africa. So, of course, yesterday we had the Spanish nurse who had treated the Spanish priest infected with Ebola, up to 56 other potential individuals exposed to Ebola. And it seems that just as in the United States, the Spanish hospital there in Madrid was unprepared to receive this patient, as nurses in the United States also claim that they haven't received Ebola training. The hospital in Dallas that took in patient 0 last week, they had got the training, but obviously it was pretty useless because they sent him home with antibiotics, even though he told them he had come from West Africa, and he was allowed to circulate in the local population, potentially exposing others. But we're joined now in studio by Anthony Gucciardi to talk about some of the response and some of the natural treatments in relation to Ebola. Anthony, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Paul. And isn't it amazing? It's just a blame game with Ebola. They just say, oh, well, it was someone else's fault. It's not a big deal. Everyone just stay calm. And I want to talk about some of the research that's out there, some dating back to 2009, for natural plant compounds inhibiting some of the growth of Ebola in animal studies, and how no one's talked about that and what that really means, and specifically which compounds. But first, I want to talk about this paradigm of illogical behavior, this paradigm of nonsensical behavior by society at large, by the mainstream media. And I want to talk about how the media has now turned this whole situation into a debate when there's no debate. It reminds me of the open borders. It reminds me of the video that you guys did with Joe Biggs crossing the border dressed as Osama bin Laden with an ISIS flag with a decapitated human head walking across the border. And there's now this magical debate of, should we just let ISIS into the United States? Should we just keep the borders wide open and let that go on? Should the Border Patrol stand down because otherwise it could be racist? It reminds me of this whole debate. Should we let people come in, fly in from Ebola-affected countries who could even be exhibiting signs of Ebola without even pre-screening them? Apparently they see if they have obvious signs, like if they're vomiting. But then the CDC official, I think it was a CDC official, he said something along the lines of, well, we hope that it's not an issue because they'd probably be too sick to travel anyway if they had Ebola. Well, that's highly reassuring, right? So the whole issue here is it's now this phony debate. It's this phony politically correct debate. Should we just let everyone in who may have Ebola? Should we just keep the borders open? When is it going to be too late? When is it going to be that there is a serious Ebola crisis in the United States? When is it going to be that thousands are affected, if it comes to that, if we don't have serious procedures, to where we say, okay, fine, now we can actually do something? And I see this debate time and time again, whether it's with gun control, open borders, Ebola, anything. It's this worthless debate. Do you not find that over and over again?
Exactly. And now, you know that Jesse Jackson is heading down to visit the Ebola family, the family of patient 0 down there. So there seems to be an effort to racialize this, bizarrely, as if it could even be thought of in that context. Now, Jesse Jackson, we had the article up on InfoWars today, is heading down to that region because the family feel they're being discriminated against. So as this get links to the border, obviously with ISIS, many concerns over that with the Joe Biggs stunt, the James O'Keefe stunt. As people link this to the border, rightly, because threats could be pouring in.
Because it can't be about logic, though. It has to be about race, because that's interesting. They put it as if it's like TMZ now. It's not, hey, these people have Ebola on average in Liberia. We should screen them and maybe talk about banning some travel or have some type of protocol. I mean, you were telling me in China, when there was a SARS outbreak, what did they do? They went through with a thermometer and checked everyone in hazmat suits?
They got on the plane before we were even allowed to get off the plane. There were teams in hazmat suits that got on, checked every individual passenger with the temperature gauge, and no one was allowed to leave the plane until that procedure had been completed. And the complete opposite is the case here. Now we've got...
And China wasn't criticized for being racist.
No.
Obviously, they're the paragon of freedom now.
But, I mean, you saw the CNN reporter earlier. No questions asked whatsoever. They were allowed straight through. Obama has promised to step up the he's going to use the customs and border people at the airports to carry out these temperature checks. Again, are they properly trained to spot these signs?
Well, let's talk about what is actually going on here, because there's a few conclusions I'd like to talk about, and all of them are scary to a degree, but I think the activity by this administration, by the CDC overall, is only fueling the so-called conspiracy culture with reason. I mean, what do you expect people to think? There's a few options. Either the CDC and the officials at large right now are so stupid and lazy that they just aren't doing anything, that they just figure, oh, whatever, it'll be fine. I think that's highly unlikely. The second one is that they're so decadent and absorbed in other things and so corrupt that the system and the bureaucracy is so scattered and logged down and sludged down that they can't actually do anything, which I think is, you know, to a degree possible. But then there's the third option, in which they are, for whatever reason, not doing something with intent. So there's wide ranges here within this scope to talk about. And there's from extreme fringe conspiracy people that, you know, obviously it's here to wipe out all of X amount race or something like that, to the more conservative viewpoint that these people are oftentimes corrupt and they've allocated resources to other things, or they simply are incompetent, which, you know, who knows the case. But the reality is there's no good conclusion. There's no conclusion that, oh, well, Ebola's not that bad, so they obviously are highly intelligent, smarter than us, and they're